Let's talk about playoff P, Paul George. I mean, this is a guy that, to me, has gone through a lot of scrutiny over the last 3 years in the playoffs. I think it's actually honestly self-inflicted. I think the playoff P nickname combined with the 2 for 16 in the Game 6 loss against Joe Ingles, rookie Donovan Mitchell and the Utah Jazz, that hurt him. Then I think the next year, I thought he actually played very well against the Blazers in the playoffs. For a guy playing with 2 bad shoulders that both needed surgery in the offseason, I thought he played great in the playoffs. But guess what he did after they lost in 5? He said that's a bad shot about the Damian Lillard FaceTime 40-footer to beat him. So then that got him into a bunch of hot water because then a lot of people started slandering his name recklessly because he said that's a bad shot. He became a meme. And then finally, I don't want to poo-poo what he went through in the bubble. I think a lot of people have. Mental health is obviously something that is, I think, sometimes overly stigmatized. I think he went through something. I'm glad that he was open about it and talked about it because it isn't something we should push under the rug. It's important. He seemed to be getting help, and I'm glad that he did that. And for anybody out there that does need it, please reach out and talk to people. But I personally do not put the bubble that much on him, but I think the combination of it's a bad shot and then playoff P after Joe Ingles and then him playing poorly, even though he was going through stuff in the bubble, I think he became this absolute meme. Getting to this playoff run, before I send it to you, one thing I did want to touch on is that I felt like a lot of people, because of those 2 past years, were looking for reasons to jump on this meme. Like, oh, ha, 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 let's make fun of Paul George. Oh, look, Paul George shot 5 for 20, or Paul George missed 2 free throws. Let's just jump on Paul George right now and, get on him and call him a choker, blah, blah, blah. Again, I thought it was actually a little unfair to him this playoffs, though it's been fair in the past. But let's get into talking about the nitty-gritty and why it was unfair. Let's analyze his 2021 playoff run. I'll send it to you. What were your thoughts on Paul George in these playoffs?
Yeah, so I just wanted to first touch on the point, I think these past playoffs were, specifically the Thunder one, that really just shed a negative, I viewed him a lot differently. I will just say, I viewed him a lot differently after that. And it happened again with the Trailblazers, and then again in the bubble, and that's when this year I predicted the Clippers to go to the finals, and I was like, can I really predict a team with Paul George, who has consistently underwhelmed the last few playoffs, to go to the finals? I said, I'm going to trust it this year. He played a lot better in the regular season. Now, he's played good in other regular seasons, but I feel like he's always been injured. But he lived up to my expectations. He might have honestly exceeded them. I know the efficiency wasn't there at times, but as the main playmaker, I thought he did a great job. I really did. And that was something that I didn't know if he was going to step up to, but he did. And I forget what game exactly it was, but there's obviously the 40-point game where he was 15 of 20.
Game 5.
Game 5, right. And I thought he was super resilient. This Clippers team went to 2 back-to-back Game 7s. They started off 3 series down 0-2 and clawed their way back. Now, I think that's a testament to not only his resilience and, his mental just strength, but also just Ty Lue's great adjustments and how much better than Doc Rivers I think he kind of showed he was. And then just going in without Kawhi, what is he going to do to step up to the plate? I thought he did step up. There was a few games where he shot abysmally. But even when he was shooting bad, he was still playing really, really good defense, grabbing tons of boards, staying positive, drawing fouls, getting to the free throw line, playmaking for others, the type of stuff that maybe you would not have seen him do in the past as well as he did. And I think that just goes to show, if his shot's not falling and he's the secondary guy, there's a lot of other things he can do to kind of still have a strong impact on the game. And that's what I think he proved to me, that he is able to, if he's not shooting well, because as we've mentioned, Paul George is very, very streaky. Very streaky. But if his shot's not going in, what is he going to do? Well, he rose to the occasion, in my opinion, in these playoffs. Offensively, with playmaking. Defensively, with defensive rebounding on Ayton. I think he had 16 rebounds a couple times. He out-rebounded someone who's 7'1", 7'2", who's got at least 30, 40 pounds on him. Like, that's incredible. And all this while playing the most minutes. He was averaging over 40 every game. And he played the most minutes by a considerable amount this playoff. So I thought this overall playoffs proved a lot to me as Paul George. And, I mean, if the Clippers run it back, I think they have as good a chance as really anyone, maybe besides the Nets, if they're fully healthy.
I 100% agree with your last point and honestly everything you mentioned. Like in my little whatever I was talking about at the beginning, I talked about it, right? How I think he's been a little overly criticized. I personally thought he was a little overly criticized for the bubble just because this is a guy who came out and told you, hey, I'm going through something. And I thought that it's more our duty to be a bit more empathetic that he might have been going through something rather than saying, oh, you just are going through it when you're playing poorly. No. It's not when he's playing poorly. He doesn't have control on when he goes through something like this. So I thought there was just a lack of entire societal empathy from the community to Paul George. But forget that. Let's just talk about his playoff run this year. The one thing he showed is in the past when Paul George has shot poorly, he struggled to impact the basketball game from other aspects. You talked about the rebounding, the assisting. He still found a way to score 20 points plus in 19 straight playoff games, every single game of this playoffs. How did he do that? He stayed aggressive, constantly getting himself to the free throw line. This is the strongest Paul George, to me, has ever played in terms of getting himself into the lane, seeking contact, finding contact, and getting himself to the free throw line. Part of the reason, to me, Paul George has had abysmal shooting performances in the playoffs in the past is that he settles too much. Yeah. He settles for his jump shot way too much. But he stayed constantly aggressive. And then the bad shooting, to me, it's a little twofold, right? Because you can have a game 4 where he shoots 5 for 20 because he's forced to take a lot of bad shots because outside of Reggie Jackson and Marcus Morris, who was going through his knee problem at the time, games 5 and 6, he looked like Marcus Morris, but games 1 through 4 in this series, Marcus Morris was hurt. And you look at the Clippers didn't really have another guy who could get their own shot. So Paul George was forced to take a lot of bad shots. So then you say, oh, Paul George is shooting horribly. But then you look at the first half of game 5 when Jeff Van Gundy and Mark Jackson are constantly overanalyzing the fact that Paul George isn't aggressive enough. Well, he's not forcing the same bad shots that he forced in game 4. So now he shoots 15 for 20, but you're in the second half when he finally finds his rhythm, but you're saying he's not aggressive enough because he's not forcing the shots that he was forcing and missing when he shot them out of the game in game 4. So it's a little bit twofold to me. And I thought this playoff run proved that he's one of the better all-around players in the entire NBA. You talked about his rebounding. I thought his passing was terrific all season. Yeah. He was essentially their point guard most of the season. I mean, Reggie Jackson plays the point guard position for them, but Reggie Jackson is really kind of a 2-guard. He's kind of a combo guard scorer for them. Paul George is who runs their offense. They run their offense through Paul George. This, to me, was kind of a version of, I'm not comparing him to LeBron, but I'm saying that what he showed, especially that 6-game stretch without Kawhi, to me, was a little bit LeBron, what
LeBron has had to do.
And yes, a watered-down version of what LeBron has done in terms of being able to be the primary rebounder, primary guy to assist the basketball, primary scorer, 40-plus minutes a night, have to defend everything and be that guy. I thought he did that. And obviously the efficiency goes down. Like LeBron in 2015, his efficiency was terrible. Now, he took a poor roster without Kevin Love and Kyrie to the finals, but he was not playing teams as good as Utah. That Bulls team was not as good as Utah. He was not playing any team as good as the Suns in the East, and he took them to the finals. I'm not saying Paul George would achieve the same thing. Paul George isn't in the same conversation as LeBron. I think in terms of what they did, though, and the type of things they were asked to do, it is similar. Obviously, Ty Lue, you touched on him. His adjustments were fantastic. He's a phenomenal coach. But I think the bottom line is that I thought Paul George had a great playoffs, and it's nice to see because he's had, to me, 2 out of the last 3 years bad playoffs. And then he had a bad moment in the 2018 playoffs where he compounded it by saying a very dumb thing, by saying the Dame Lillard shot was a bad shot after Dame Lillard FaceTimed him from 40 feet.
I mean, in all honesty, it was a bad shot. If you would have told someone before the game that someone's going to take a 40-foot shot
to win the game,
shot, and you would have said, would you like your team to shoot that shot? You would have said no. and you would have not even thought about it.
I think so too.
Because it went in, it was considered not a bad shot. It was a bad shot. It just happened to go in.
I think so too. I think the reason people got on Paul George is because he sounded salty. But I thought he got a hell of a contest on the shot too. Yeah.
Like, he's not wrong. It's just like if you lose and you just get like someone hits a game winner in your face from that deep, like you probably just don't want to say anything because like it can't help. Anything you say is not going to help. Besides like, they're a great team. Dame's a great guy. Like anything you say to like discount it's going to sound like, yeah, you're salty or you're just like very full of yourself.
Oh, 100%. 100%. Honestly, and I think that's what really gets him. It was the playoff P proclamation and then the Joe Ingles. It's just that he says things that just rubs people the wrong way. And I actually liked what he said after this playoffs, honestly. He didn't say anything except for the fact that, you know what, I fell short again. And it was nice to hear him say that because I think 2 years ago, if Paul George played the way he played in this playoffs, the all-around basketball that he played, the minutes he logged, a lot of games he was really putting the Clippers on his back with a lot of clutch shooting from Reggie Jackson to help him out, effort from Mann and Beverly. And, of course, when Marcus Morris played well, this Clippers team looked really good without Kawhi Leonard. But I think the biggest thing is that he didn't say anything controversial or anything. He just took it on the chin and he moved on. And I'm really excited to see if the Clippers are able to retain Reggie Jackson, retain Nick Batum,
run it back.
Contract, how Terrence Mann looks next year. Maybe Ibaka's back heels because I think that I understand the Clippers are a cursed franchise, but I looking at their roster, looking at their coach, looking at their 2-star players, I think that they do have 1 year where things could possibly go right. And if things go right, I think they will be the NBA champions.
I think they have like 1 or 2 more years. Paul George is 31, which is kind of crazy. Like he's getting up there. Kawhi's probably late 20s, I want to say.
Yeah, he just turned 30.
Yeah, so like I feel like the time clock's ticking, but I think Ballmer's cool with going into the luxury for a couple years because like it's Steve Ballmer. I mean, they got the Ballmer camp for a reason. So yeah, and then further to the point you made about Paul George taking on the chin, I think it's just a different like mentality with him, and that's a good thing. So obviously, like his teams have gone through a lot. I mean, they collapsed a 3-1 lead in the Western Conference semis last year. So when something like that happens, like that's hard to come. Like you have to be resilient, and I think that just shows like the change of attitude that's year over year, and with Kawhi in town, anything's possible.
I agree with that, actually, and I actually do want to make that point before we move on. I think when people say Paul George is, I mean, I don't use these terms, but people call him, the operative words are like soft, or he isn't that guy, all those things. I think it's a little bit closed-minded because the one thing Paul George is, if he's anything, like, I understand the criticism to Paul George. I'm a Paul George fan, but I'm not here like, yeah, he deserved to be criticized after 2017 with OKC. 100% saying Dame bad shot. Yup, he deserved to be criticized. The bubble thing, do I wish we empathize with what he was going through a bit more? Yes. But did he deserve to be criticized for how he was playing basketball? 100% yes, because he was terrible in the Mavs series. He was terrible in the Nuggets series, especially by his standards. But the one thing to me that you can't say about Paul George is that you can't say he isn't resilient. He is really resilient. This is a guy that cracked his leg in half. One of the ugliest injuries I've ever seen. He fought back from that. This is a guy who fought back from two shoulder surgeries in the same offseason. This is a guy who fought back from all the memeing that people had on him when Dame hit that shot on him. All the memes he took from the bubble, what happened. All the memes he took from Joe Ingles outplaying him in a closeout game in a game 6. So if there's anything you can say about Paul George, he is very resilient because he's overcome quite a bit in his career. Now, does he play poorly in big games? Yeah, he's played poorly in big games. But to me, that isn't a sign of softness or mentally weak per se. I don't know why it gets that kind of representation because if anything, Paul George is mentally strong and resilient.
Definitely.
isn't the kind of guy that performs in pressure situations. I don't know if that's necessarily a weakness.
There's like
as much
few who do, and also too, it's just kind of like with him, like, yeah, I mean, if you say someone took a bad shot after you get a three splashed in your face and you lose, like, it's just a bad look, and then you declare yourself playoff P after playing well in round one of the series.
Game
and you
one
losing, and Joe Ingles is taking your lunch money. Yeah, people are going to come at you. And it also just comes with the territory of being a top 15 player. You know, greatness is expected of you. And if you're not consistently performing with greatness, people are going to get on your case. That's the nature of the NBA. And especially when there's only 5 guys, like if you play bad and you're one of the two best guys on your team suffers a lot more. It's not like the NFL where if you're a receiver and you drop a few passes and you're the best guy, teams can pick up slack. But if there's 5 guys and you're the best and you're playing bad, your team's not going to go very far. It's that simple.
Especially if you talk. And that was the big thing for Paul George. He talked. And if you talk, you just open yourself up for more criticism. Like if you say that's a bad shot, you're going to get criticized. Like the playoff fee declaration, well, then don't let Joe Ingles outplay you in a closeout playoff game.
That's just that's just a bad look. I mean, Joe Ingles, love the guy. He looks like he's a middle-aged accountant. Like, he just doesn't look like – if he wasn't 6'8", like, he just doesn't look like some guy who's going to be besting a top 15 player. And it's no disrespect to Joe Ingles because he played great, but, like, if you talk a big game and then, like, Joe Ingles, like, giving you buckets, Joe Ingles is a hell of a basketball player. He shouldn't be outplaying Paul George in any playoff series on any basketball court. It's like LeBron, not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5, not 6. Well, if Jason Terry plays as well as you in an NBA Finals, if JJ Barea is shown at times outplaying you at certain specific moments in a playoff series, because you said not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5, not 6, you're going to have to eat that L all the way through until you beat the Thunder. And honestly, to me, he took that criticism. The time that LeBron really got appreciated and people gave him that credit was when he came through in that game 7 against Miami. With Miami against the Spurs, and with 28 seconds left, hit that clutch 18-footer, which to me is still the clutchest shot of LeBron's career to seal the series in Game 7. Definitely, but yeah. Not to get too off topic, but I think that'll wrap up Paul George. So overall, I think we're both pretty impressed. I would say he exceeded my expectations considering what he's done in the past. And I kind of root for the Clippers a little bit, so I'm excited to see what they do next season. If they can run it back, bring Kawhi, get Paul George, get some of their insanely good role players. Like Nick Batum, like that guy's insane.
Yeah, Jeff Van Gundy loves Nick Batum.
I love Nick Batum as well. I mean, he kind of, tough what happened with him on the Hornets, but bring back Nick Batum and just run it back. They have a good team.
Me too. And I'm hoping that Paul George gets a W, honestly, because I have this weird thing where when I feel like too many people are like just trashing a guy for, I think, maybe an overblown reason and stuff, I become a fan of that guy. So I've always liked Paul George since his Pacer days and all of that. But then I became a big Paul George fan this year because I felt like people were getting on him and it was becoming too much. Like, there's a reason that I might be the only person in Chicago that's a 49ers fan that thinks that Daniel Jones has a future, just because I'm still go back to I became a Daniel Jones fan the moment in the draft when everybody just trashed Daniel Jones for being the draft pick and said, this is like, he should never been the draft pick. This is wrong. He got drafted because he knows the Mannings, blah, blah, blah. When he's actually a way better quarterback than Dwayne Haskins. Nobody will say that. But, so for that reason, I'm with you. I'm also going to be cheering for the Clippers. Obviously, my Pistons come first, but here and there, just hoping Paul George, can get that elusive title and kind of shut people's mouths.
Give Nick Batum and Reggie Jackson a ring. They deserve it.
Yeah, they're breeding former Pistons. Marcus Morris, Reggie Jackson, Luke Kennard. Pistons are the best developmental team in the NBA. They put these guys on the map.
The Clippers are the Pistons West.
That's facts. Of course you want to be the Pistons. Come on.
Just the city of LA in general. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Drummond. They go from one great city to the next, so you can't really.
True.
You're living a life of luxury.
You're preaching right now. You're preaching.